Good afternoon, everybody. We are almost ready. Okay. Take your seat, we will start. We have limited time allocated to us, but we are going to discuss a very important issue. I have the role of coordinator. Let me introduce myself. My name is Mario Pezzini. I am the director of the OECD Development Center, a center where we have several countries members, 42, 24 are OECD countries, 18 are non-OECD countries. Here we have Egypt, for example, which is member of the center. We are addressing today a very passionate issue. We have heard several times that there are three major phenomena taking place. The first is the fact that the geography of poverty is changing. And as a consequence, if the objective of our collective action is reducing poverty, how should we adjust our policy making in respect to this major change? The second issue is, well, development is a very complicated matter. I remember a professor I had, Mr. Kindenberger. He used to write in his book that the fact that we rate country accordingly with the GDP, it would be as if you go to see a doctor and the doctor asks you only your weight. I would be particularly unhappy if that's the only measure, but let's say that in general it is obvious is insufficient. Now, if we want to work for improving the well-being condition of people living in developing countries, therefore, we need to take the issue in a broader way. And the policy to consider do not limit to poverty, but also, for example, to inequalities, as we do know that the national averages are very imperfect measures of a condition of a country. But then there is also a third debate that may appear on this table. And the debate comes from a fact that one colleague of mine brought to my attention some years ago. He came to my room and he said, Mario, we have taken the average rate of growth of OECD country and we have multiplied it twice. And we went to see how many countries were capable to do better than the double of the OECD. And the result was that in the 90s, there were 13 countries that did better than the double of the OECD average. Let's say the developed countries in general. And well, China was in that group, Chile was in that group. But then he told me, tell me in the first 10 years of 2000, how many countries did better than the double of the OECD average rate of growth? They were not 13. Guess. They were 83. 83 countries did better than the double of the OECD countries. We call this phenomena shifting wealth. There was a general change in the economy. The center of gravity was moving from the Azores Islands now to the eastern border of Turkey and farther Asia and in part south. Now, behind this number, there is the fact that the collective global wealth is the result of interaction from developed countries and developing countries. We all benefit from these locomotives of development that appear. How can we guarantee that this emerging country can continue to play the role of locomotive we all need? These are three questions at the origin of many discussions, and I think in a certain sense at the origin of this panel. The panel will be structured in three very clear phases, as in the blues music. The first, but it will not be sad, don't worry. The first will be the opening remarks. I am doing my job. I will leave the floor to a presentation extremely interesting, using demographic data to show what is happening in the dynamics. And then we will have Juan Manuel Valle that will introduce ourselves to the general questioning of the trajectory that Mexico is following in this field. This will be the first part. Then we will move to a second part where we will have very relevant actors in this scene, and they will answer some of the questions that I will put to them. At the end of that, we will open for questions from the floor, and maybe we will have a second round. Promise, we will end when it was planned. Therefore, let me start from now immediately and give the floor to our experts that I'm sure will keep the time, and he will speak about a very important aspect. It is Hans Rosling, from the founder of Gapminder. Please, a warm applause.
Can I get my image? Thank you very much for the invitation. I am an outsider. I'm an independent professor taking on the task to teach about the world. My main message to my student is that we don't live in a globalized world. Globalization has not even started. The only thing we have seen so far is a decrease of Western hegemony and dominance. That's what we have seen. I will show you what will happen when we will get a globalized world. I divided the world into 4 different parts here. Good, when you are independent, you can decide where you put the border between Europe and Asia. And I decided to make Australia Asian. And if these are the 4 parts of the world, we are 7 billion people. Where do they live, these 7 billion? 1 billion in America, 1 in Europe, 1 in Africa, and 4 in Asia. Remember the PIN code of the world, 1114. Amazing many people don't know this. That we don't get it right. It's already an Asian world. We also know fairly well what will happen. To 2050, there will be no more people in Europe, just a few retired people in Latin America. There will be 1 billion more in Asia. And then population growth in Asia will stop. There will be a doubling of Africa's population up to 2050, 2 billion. And fast population growth will end by the end of this century, and by then there will be 1 or 2 billion more in Africa. Now look at this world. This world is not a distant future. Many of my grandchildren will still be alive. It's the world of my grandchildren. That's how I think. It's not so far away. And if I now divide this, and I take North and South America, East and West Europe, I'd get what used to be called the Old West. That will be less than 10% of the world population. 80% will be living in Africa and Asia. When I was a student, 30% and more were living up here. And Atlantic was the main sea of trade. It was Pacific for a short while. In the future, the Indian Ocean will be the center of global trade. And this is something we know amazingly well. Now, what does this mean? I can show you how the fertility has changed and why we know this. Look here. I have 1 bubble for each country. Size of the bubble show the population, China and India here. Red is Asia, green is America, yellow is Europe, and the blue ones here are Africa. This is 1962, 50 years ago. Number of babies per woman, large families, small families, length of life in life expectancy, short life, long life. The world was divided into 2 groups of countries, 2 clear clusters, developed world and developing world. They had large families and short lives, and they had small families and long life. How much has that changed? I will start the world, and you will see what happens now when I start the world. Ready, steady, go. Here we go. Can you see that life is getting longer, and family planning starts in China. They go to smaller family here. India is following, and also most of Latin America. This is Mexico. This is Brazil. And here comes a lot of African countries also, and the whole world clusters up to that corner where they are healthy with small families. It's a completely new world today. This is impossible to divide in developed and developing countries any longer. And it's not what everyone knows that there's 1-child policy in China, 1.66, whereas in Hong Kong, 1.1, without any 1-child policy. How come that where you don't have 1-child policy, you have 1 child, and where you have 1-child policy, you have 1.6? It's very important to check the data also. That means we have a tendency of very low fertility rate in large parts of Asia today. Now, what I will do with this is to show you 2 countries, how huge this change is. Look here, I picked 4 countries: Mexico and the United States. And this is in 1962. United States had 70 years and 3.4 children. The Netherlands had little less children and lived a little longer. Indonesia was here and Mexico was there. Now, when I run these countries, you will see what an amazing catch-up which has happened, where Mexico and Indonesia almost have catched up completely with the Netherlands. Not exactly with Indonesia, but they are somewhere 1971 Netherlands. Whereas Mexico today just have 2 years shorter life expectancy than the United States of America. And the gap in life expectancy between United States and Canada is actually bigger than between Mexico and United States. This is a convergence of the world which is very, very strong. And this can tell us also if we look at money. My classical graph here, just to remind you, is that if I mark the countries here with same life expectancy here, now income in purchasing power, $1,000, $10,000 and more, 1800, every country was poor and sick, with the exception of Britain, Netherlands and United States, the main slave traders. They were in the top, they were a little richer than the others. And what happens in the world then was that most countries remained down in that corner for 150 years, whereas the West took off. And through the world wars ended up in this situation. But now, look at China, the big red bubble coming up there. Mao Zedong dies, Deng Xiaoping say, let's go for the money, and there China goes. What we have here is a world which is no longer a dichotomy. It doesn't make sense to have developing and developed, and it doesn't help to change to north and south. No student passed the exam who used those 2 terms, because we have a continuous world from Congo there and to the great irritation of Sweden, Norway up here. Which is distinctly now both richer and healthier than Sweden. And we have to live with it. And you see countries on all levels. And the huge amount is in the middle. Now we're going to discuss middle-income countries. That's the world. That's 5 billion people who live in the middle, with 1 billion poorer there and 1 billion richer on that side. It's a huge group. And I intend to try to show you the difference within that group. And can I have tried this one on? I will not be able to have this in the hand all the time. That's good. I will move just a bit. Okay. I need a 3rd arm. This is the income. Now I only talk money. Only talk money. This is 1987. I should go a little backwards to about 1970s here. Look. $1 a day, $10 a day, $100 a day. The people of the world, Europe, America, Africa, and Asia. It was a camel world. It had 2 humps. There was those with very modest income here, then very few, and then more who were richer here. What has happened to the income? There was a dichotomy, industrialized and developing. But when I drag this forward, what happens is this. Look. Asia is growing and getting richer, and the hump goes away, the camel dies, and we live in a dromedary world with 1 hump only. It's a very good thing to remember. Camel is gone, dromedary is there. 1 big hump. Of course, it's a modest level. It's $10, a little less than $10. But we don't have 2 types of countries. And can you see how many people it is over here at this end? Now, if we look at 2 countries only, 3 countries, China there, United States and United Kingdom. This was 1966, almost no overlap, and this has happened. The entire United Kingdom can be found inside the distribution of China. Each person in United Kingdom has 1 person in China who have the same income, and within 10 years the same will be for United States. But China still have poor people here, but has distinctly decreased the extreme poverty over in this end. But they have a very, very big range. Now, how do we then divide the world? What are the practices used? Here I have to go up. There we are. And now, I show you money down here. I changed to GNI, exchange rate money, not purchasing power. That is what we use for the cutoff for aid. And then I put child mortality here on a sort of log scale. I compressed the high child mortalities and expanded the other ones. You can see the importance of money. That's why I love money. Every public health professor should love money, because we know how to use it. But money is the main determinant of lowering child mortality. Then you can have good health policy and you move on this side, or you have bad health policies and very special conditions in your country and you move on that side. Now, how does the United Nations, including WHO, define developed and developing countries? In the MDG report, all developing countries are reporting. And this is the line. The line comes down here, and then suddenly they discover that Qatar is over here now, and Qatar is still a developing country. But the United States is not a developing country, but Emirate is, and then Singapore down here is still a developing country. And they had to go back, and of course South Korea is a developing country, and Saudi Arabia is developing, Chile is developing, and Malaysia and Cuba are developing countries. Albania is not a developing country, but Sri Lanka is a developing country, and Moldova Republic is not a developing country. This doesn't have any intellectual content. I have spent months of postdocs and tried to find out why. It is the fertility rate of 1963 that defines whether you are a developing country today. We have to upgrade. We have to upgrade the classification. And of course, it's much better to say lower middle, and high income countries, because they are defined. At least we know whether we like it or not, we know where it is. Now, if I do one thing here, and see, I divided middle-income countries, because when I talk about this, I get one question all the time, or some statement. It's home to most of the extremely poor. 70% of the extremely poor live in middle-income countries. That's a very, very bad statement. It is technically correct, but it's confusing. It's home to 5 out of 7 billion people. And it have national GNI that range from 1,000 to 13,000. So where in that range are the extremely poor? Middle-income countries, to me, is a too wide category to do distinct policy advice for, even that. So where are they? 85% of extremely poor are in nations with GNI per capita less than 4,000. And 75 are below 2,000. Or now Nigeria upgraded, if I say 2,500, something there. Here, look what I did. I put linear scale here. The size of bubble now is the number of child deaths. And this is money. And you can see that almost all child deaths are below $2,000. 6 out of 7 million children who die in the world are below $2,000. And then it doesn't help to have the policy up to here. There's almost, look how small these bubbles are, almost no one. China is a big bubble because they have so many children born. But there's mainly neonatal deaths now in China. So if I then color them with fertility rate, number of children per woman, you can see that all the high child fertility rate is about $2,000. Below $2,000, with the exception of Angola. But Angola is a newly rich country that hasn't been able yet to convert that resources into social development. So this is more or less where we are today. And I think that this DAC line, that we can't use any longer. Gavi is here. I would advise that when it comes for poverty reduction, it's 4,000. And here we need completely new forms of collaboration, which take out the enormous skill which exists in the upper middle income countries. Here's a photo just to show you how the world has changed. Another meeting of international policy, G20, when George Bush gathered the leaders of the world to borrow money. It was in 2008. I think it will be in the history book. So I acquired it. I have the right to show it. And we zoom in and see who was it that lended most money to the United States in that year of great difficulty. Of course, those who stood closest. It was a socialist, a communist, and 2 Muslims. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
This was the starting remarks. Let me now give the floor for the opening remarks to Juan Manuel Valle, which is, as you know, the chief of the Agency for Cooperation of Mexico. Please. Yeah.
Buenas tardes a todos. Voy a hablar en español.
Good afternoon. I'm
Les
going
doy
to talk
un segundo para
in
que se pongan
Spanish. So I will give you some time so
los
you
audífonos.
can put your headsets.
Cuando se presentó el programa, cuando se incorporó el concepto de países de renta media
when
en
the
el programa,
concept of middle
y seguramente
income
después de la
countries was
presentación del
incorporated
profesor
to this
Rosling,
program,
con
and
más razón,
after Professor
muchos se
Rosler's
preguntaron por
presentation,
qué
many of
queríamos poner
us
este panel,
were
porque
wondering
México
why we
proponía
wanted to put this
el
panel,
tema
why
de
Mexico
países de
was
renta media.
proposing the
Y
middle
trataré en
income
estos minutos de
country
dejar muy claro el
topic, and I
porqué,
would like
más
to
allá de
make
lo
it
que ya se
clear
dijo,
in
que a
these
lo mejor lo que tenemos que
minutes.
hacer es
Beyond
una
what's
revisión
been
de
said,
nuestras
probably
propias
we need to
definiciones.
review our own
Creemos que este es un tema
concepts.
fundamental
We
para
think that
México
this
y
is a
para
core
102
topic for
países que
Mexico
estamos
and
clasificados como
102
países de
countries
renta
that
media,
are
así como
classified
para
as
los muchos
middle
actores
income
que están
countries and
involucrados
all
en
the
esta agenda.
stakeholders that
¿Qué
are
significa
involved in
ser un
this
país de renta
agenda.
media?
What
¿Podemos
does
hablar
being
homogéneamente de
middle
países de
income
renta media?
country means?
Claramente la
We could
respuesta es
talk
no.
about this,
México,
all countries could be like that.
Claramente
Clearly,
creemos que
no.
en un
In
rango
Mexico,
entre
we
1,000 y
think
12,000
that
dólares hay un
in a
universo de
range
países
between
con características
$1,000 and
muy distintas, con
$2,000,
necesidades
we have a
distintas y con
range of
retos
different
distintos.
countries with different
Si nos vamos
challenges
al
and
ingreso
opportunities.
nacional
If
bruto
we go
per
to
cápita
the
promedio
per
de los países
capita
que se encuentran
gross
más abajo en la
income
categoría,
in
estos
those countries
representan solamente
below
el
the
11%
category, they
del
represent
promedio de los que
only
están en los primeros
11%
10
of the
lugares.
average of the
El ingreso
top 10.
nacional bruto de Venezuela, que
The
es el
gross
primer país en la lista
national
de países de
income,
renta media,
which is
es 12 veces el de
the country
Senegal.
that represents
Lo
is
que es
12
más,
times the
la
one of
suma del
Senegal.
ingreso nacional bruto
And
de los 5
the
primeros
addition
países
of this
equivale a
income,
la suma
it's equal
de los
to the
últimos
addition
30
of the last
Tenemos un
31
abismo en
countries.
estas
So we
definiciones,
have a big gap
entre
in
países
these
que
comparisons
compartimos
between
una
countries
misma clasificación y por lo
that
tanto,
share the
en el
same
mejor de los
classification.
casos, y como nos indicó el
And in the
profesor
best of
Rosling,
cases, as
deberíamos
Professor
obligarnos a
Rosling
discutir su
mentioned, we
utilidad
should to
como criterio de
discuss
asignación de
their
cooperación,
usefulness
incluido
as a
los
cooperation
créditos
classification
concesionales y las preferencias
criterion,
arancelarias.
including duties and other concessions. But this is not only a topic of two groups, as it was suggested. Heterogeneity is also tangible in these two concepts due to the inequality that we have. If we concentrate ourselves in inequality, middle-income countries are the most unequal countries, so we have big challenges in equality and development. In 2010, the three top countries were middle-income countries. Two of them were above $4,000 that were mentioned before. So the country that was below $4,000 was a country where 10% of the wealthiest population had 47% of the population, and 10% just 1% of poverty. So we believe that the goals of post-2015 goals are closely related of social economic policies in middle-income countries, both for the direct impact on population and also in a particular manner due to the multiplying effect over effect of other countries, to the extent that these middle-income countries or high middle-income can improve their institutional capacities and also improving South-South cooperation, they will grow. Which is the scenario of these figures? Well, we believe that there are two clear things. One, classification criteria impact in the assignation of cooperation, and they need to be revisited in other terms to reflect human capacity. And we believe that at least one step, as it was suggested in the previous presentation, it's necessary, but we think that we can also put other elements, that multi-factor poverty elements. Second, as the Intergovernmental Panel has said, the General Secretary of United Nations on the Development Agenda post-2015, the next development goals should be guaranteed that no one is left behind, implying, no doubt, the serious integration of considerations of equality and inclusion, both in goals and methodologies that we use. In turn, cooperation policies should be strategically directed where they are needed the most, with the support of local governments and subnational authorities, and for the specific needs of each middle-income country. A few last words about the middle-income countries. We, as middle class of nations, have a social uprising aspiration, increase our income and reduce inequality, but at the same time we have the awareness about the importance of supporting those countries that have lower development. Suppliers of South-South cooperation are middle-income countries, and we're aware of our responsibility on supporting in a solidary manner and following fundamental principles like local ownership, transparency, and accountability. And I hope that this discussion helps us to put on the table concrete initiatives to progress on this sense, mainly focused to what Professor Rosling referred as cooperation forms. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to finish with this introduction. And now we shall begin with the experts, and we will start by posing questions that come up from everything you've heard. Amongst others, the description that was not introduced, which clarifies that there is a general trend in the long run that somehow reminds us the theory of modernization. That is, modernization means to move from big families to nuclear families, from the field to the city, from arts, crafts to industry, etc. But they tell us precisely, the people that opened the remarks, be careful, this may be a long-term trend. The one we see today is heterogeneity, even in the middle-income countries. Therefore, the subject on measurement, as Juan Manuel mentioned, is vital. Now, I'd like to start in English.
To Alicia Bárcena, which is the Executive Secretary of ECLAC, the United Nations Commission, Economic Commission for Latin America, and very well known here and in all our debate, also because Alicia, for many years, she has been insisting correctly on how much heterogeneous is the picture. So, Alicia, the question I would like to address you is, okay, if we have the need for new classification criteria, what kind of criteria do you think will be suitable to address these similarities and differences that appear within the middle-income countries? Please.
Thank you, Mario. I'm going to speak in Spanglish, sort of. But let me tell you what I want to do first, before talking about classification. Like, classification for what purpose? You see, we classify for what? And we're living on a classification, as Hans told us, of 1962. So this is wrong, totally wrong. So the problem is that we need to have a new partnership for development, but development is totally different as it was in 1962. So today, the world is trying to define a new development paradigm, which is based on post-2015 is about that, by the way. And one of the main premises of post-2015, coming from my region, is let's decolonize the development agenda. That is, we don't want the rich to tell us what the poor has to do. Number one premise, our region, Latin America and the Caribbean, we come from a very large decade of conditionalities, you know. We don't want any more conditionalities. That's enough with the IMF. You know, so we want to have a different sort of approach that is based on premises that are extremely different. From the Latin American and Caribbean perspective, the first goal of development has to be equality. Equality, which means closing gaps. It's not only, you know, it's not only to eradicate extreme poverty. Hello, extreme poverty has to be eradicated, yes or yes. The only acceptable goal in the next 3 decades is zero. Zero poverty, extreme poverty, zero hunger, punto. And then we have to move further. So the classification that we are suggesting, if we accept the premise that we want equality in the center, that inclusion, as Mexico is saying, is the process to get to equality, then we are in business. And inclusion means economic inclusion, social inclusion, and environmental inclusion. But it also means not only national or international inclusion, it also means global inclusion, you know, because enough is enough. And so what ECLAC is identifying is that we have, what Hans said, is that we have two extremes. One extreme, poverty, and the other extreme is wealth. Concentration of wealth. So what we have to do is to close structural gaps. And that's what ECLAC is suggesting. We are suggesting that a measure to identify the problems of middle-income countries, and that is of the middle 5 billion, as you said, is structural gaps. One structural gap, and we have identified 12. We have identified number one, the income gap. Yes, money still is important, and income is a very important source. And the only way of achieving equality is by jobs, and jobs that have social protection, not any job. We have jobs with social protection. So income gap, inequality gap among countries and within countries, investment gap, productivity and innovation, infrastructure, education, health gap, Margaret, financial, fiscal gaps, gender gaps, and environmental gaps. Now, people think that the middle-income countries are fine because they can already mobilize domestic and international financial flows. Wrong. The problem in my region is that foreign direct investment, a very important financial flow, only gets to 6 countries. Punto. Brazil, Mexico, Peru, Chile, you know, the usual suspects. But it never gets to, I mean, really, it doesn't get to the Caribbean poor, it doesn't get to El Salvador, it doesn't get to Nicaragua, and still they are called middle-income countries. And then the second problem is to mobilize external financing, you know, through foreign direct investment. And then, of course, when you are qualified as middle-income countries, they take off your trade benefits. Europe, hello, you know what you do. You say the Caribbean countries are middle-income. Now they do not have preferential access to our markets. That's the problem. So when we are talking about closing gaps, we are talking about closing key asymmetries. And key asymmetries are about how we get growth. We know growth is not sufficient, but we also believe that growth is necessary, of course. But we have to understand that equality can be a powerful driver of growth. Ask Norway, ask Sweden, ask Finland. They decided a social pact before being rich. Am I wrong, Hans? I'm not wrong, because you decided to distribute among your society a functional distribution, which means not only the rich paying for the poor, but how the distribution of the gains of productivity of that GDP is distributed more fairly. Today, in our middle-income countries, the gains of productivity remains in very few hands. So we have to make sure that we put in place redistributive policies. Of what sort? Fiscal, Of what sort? Are we rich on natural resources? Yes, we are. But who's taking our gains of productivity? The multinationals. We want the multinationals, welcome. But please leave a little bit of the gains of productivity to the national development. You know, give us royalties. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm sorry I took so much time, but these are the way ECLAC wants to measure. Let's measure the structural gaps for equality through structural change. And what is the instrument? Politics. What is the instrument? Multilaterality. We want civil society, the private sector, everywhere. Thank you.
The last thing I would like to do as a moderator is to cut the la parole to Alicia Bárcena, obviously. But we have to go on, and I think you made your point very clearly. We need several measures to understand what is the situation of countries in a set that include many differences. And obviously this variable needs to be taken into account. But this variable measures something. And what do they measure? They measure, in many of these countries, specific difficulties. And very often we call them trap. There are those that say development is the fact that certain countries are in a trap. And in order to develop, they need to break first that trap. Some call also traps the middle income trap, as if there was a specific middle income trap. That's something I don't want to assert, I want more to raise as a question. And que me permiten de darle la palabra ahora a Gonzalo Robles, que es el
I'm going to give the word to Mr. Robles, who's the General Secretary of Development from Spain, with this question. Which are, according to your opinion, I know that this is very difficult to answer after Alicia's intervention, but which is the biggest trap that these countries face, and what could traditional cooperation could do for these to tackle this trap? Very much. I would like to congratulate Mexico for this event and for having included middle-income countries for us. This is very important. I think that the biggest trap is that the international community fell into the trap of neglecting people, because those of us gathered here, those of us who are devoted to cooperation and development, which is our main goal, which is our devotion. I think that we are devoted to people. There are other institutions all over the world that manage economic governance, that look for structure, infrastructure, other things that help development. But if we have development cooperation, it's because people are the subject matter of our task. And I'm not going to discuss Professor Swartz if 70% live in middle-income countries, because maybe statistics could be true, half true, or a big lie. I don't know where we are standing, but I know that any of those 100 countries that are middle-income countries, without looking at any of statistics, any of us know that these countries have people with huge needs, and we know that in spite of these statistics, in spite of being middle-income countries, a lot of people do not have access to sanitation, social services, water, education, and we do not have gender equality. Those are the big traps that statistics hide people, which is important subject matter. So in these middle-income countries have a huge weakness, that growth does not reach everybody. It is not equal. So those are the big traps. And which is the goal? The goal is that we need to strengthen these countries, that we provide them with the capabilities. And this is not a lot of investment in funds, because some of these countries have resources that they need to mobilize, but they know how to do it. They need to have institutional capability, a health education institution. But these gaps that we have identified, that we know physically without any statistic, are the development agenda. And in this post-2015 agenda, people continue being the center of our work, and international agendas think about people. They need to be included in this global, but we also need to have differentiated agenda. Growth should be distributed and equalitarian, and we need to solve this. So what can we do in our traditional methods? Betting for this, because that classification that Alicia mentioned, it's obsolete. I don't know if we can revisit it, but I know it's not complete. And probably when we established, and now we have new indicators, and we need to have different meanings for justice, equality, social probabilities. So donor countries should include this in the agenda post-2015, training, knowledge transfer. And the world that we need to live at is not the same world of 20 or 30 years ago. We have access to technology, which is not reaching to middle-income countries. This technological gap is very important, because bringing education to a place is not only a place in a teacher for literacy, but we need to guarantee that this child can get access to the web. Otherwise, they are illiterate in a global sense. So my bet is that the post-2015 agenda needs to include people, regardless of the income. We need to break with these lack of justice and inequality gaps, and we need to make development accessible for everybody. And we should include this in our middle-income countries. Thank you.
Là maintenant, on a une tradition dans le travail sur le développement, qui est une tradition qui prétend que l'État central et les économistes, ils ont toutes les informations indispensables pour intervenir.
There is a subject of economies.
Pour le développement d'une région,
they may decide what we may do to help people's developments as well as the world's developments. We know that this is a hypothesis, and we know that it has failed several times. Oftentimes we're told that we want to build a cathedral within the desert, and that we should invest in the most proper way. Well, there are many stakeholders. Amongst others, we have local authorities who have basic knowledge that may help us to make decisions on what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. But there are also traps that we're facing, and they have to do with the enormous brutalization that takes place in many of these countries. So we are very lucky, because we have the vice mayor of the city of Lyon, who's going to share with us about the efforts they've made in this city. I have prepared my speech in English, but since you are talking to me in French, then I'm going to talk French. There are many French-speaking people. I'm a vice president of the community of Lyon. I'm also co-chair of the Commission for Development Cooperation of the Worldwide Organization of the Local Powers, which is known as City and United Government. As vice chairman of a city, I'm not truly a politician, but I am part of a very interesting group. I think that quick urbanization is one of the challenges we're going to face in the 21st century. But this would be a challenge that would go hand in hand with something we've noticed for 20 years already, especially in countries of middle income. That is to say, this is a very quick movement of decentralization, which makes that things up to date, things that we're mentioning today when we want to tackle poverty, reduce unequalness among society, And the whole world, we've been able to transfer competencies to local collective groups. Basic things such as drinkable water, waste management, social households. These are collective and regional actions that are in charge of all of this, and they are right in the middle of the battle against poverty on behalf of development. They have the best skills to do this, because we all know after Busan meetings that we are in this integrated partnership, so they are the best ones to do this, to carry out these partnerships in their territory, to gather social civil societies, donor countries, etc. So I think these are the ideal stakeholders to be able to achieve this goal. Access to basic services. Everything I have mentioned are governors and governments that are in charge of this service providing. And obviously, they must be right in the center of all these discussions. We also talk a lot about this approach on inclusive partnership. There are examples that prove that we should be able to do this when we talk about capacity building. Yesterday, I heard a lot on this idea. Capacity building and all of these collective actions from the north and the south, which are working together. Of course, the words north and south are between quotation marks, because yesterday and today we've been discussing the meaning of south and north. The point is that they work together to reinforce their capabilities. Yesterday we talked about economic development, its conditions. Conditions for this development to exist, and of course the capacity to be able to collect local taxes. So this capacity building is a subject we have to cover, and we have to take it to the context of local authorities. Local authorities have all the competencies. They are right in the center of everything we must achieve to overcome challenges, development objectives, sustainable development. This is right in the center of the objectives after 2015. Something that really calls my attention is that there is a need. There is always a need for a local governor to call people's attention and for the subject to become important. 10 years ago, I've seen that we've made some progress. I've participated in conferences in Accra, in Paris. I also attended Busan's meeting, and now I'm here in Mexico City. And ever since Busan, I've been able to observe certain achievements. Now, governors are part of plenary sessions, and it seems to me that we, of course, need the attendance of governors in plenary sessions. I have this feeling, and I do hope you agree with me, we do need governors to reduce poverty and to be able to create local development. But I would also like to see other stakeholders rather than governors only. Yesterday I felt a bit uncomfortable because during the opening ceremony I heard who were the participants, who were the stakeholders, who were the interested parties, the government, international organizations, civil society, donor countries, of course, the private sector. But I hardly heard the attendance of local governors who are truly in charge of all these things, which are vital. And these are all the things that we want to tackle. These are the challenges we're facing in the future. So it seems to me that that is basic to reach post-2015 goals. There are reports from Busan, from Rio +20, but let us talk about these amongst each other, about the advantages. Governors also need to build their capacities. This is something they do at a local level. And within South-South cooperation, triangular cooperation, for example, there are associations in Brazil that work with associations in Mozambique. There are municipalities that already have associations on the Netherlands that work with Southern Africa that works with African countries. So this is something that has been done for a long time. Local authorities do this, and they have done it for several years, but we have not included them in this global alliance. And I think we should include them because they are also stakeholders on behalf of an effective development. So I think that we should set as a priority capacity building both for governments, institutions of developing countries, but also collective groups that have more and more capacities, but they need more. Thank you. I think that your presentation was very clear, and I believe that local authorities are an engine. A car may not drive without an engine.
New need for measuring the diversity. We have heard about the importance of certain traps and problems that exist there. One of which is obviously the capacity to mobilize all the untapped resources in a country that exist in different places that sometimes don't follow with the same rhythm. But now let's go now to the action of cooperation. What is done in order to address those issues. This is our second part of expert. We have eaten a lot of time up to now, and unfortunately we will suffer for the following discussion. But let's move to the second part. And I think that the best way to start is to start with witnessing what a country is facing and doing. And the country in this case is Costa Rica. We have here the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Costa Rica, Joconta Ubeda Riviera. Te va a dar la palabra. Entiendo que tú nos vas a hablar de Costa Rica, de su experiencia, pero también de la CELAC y de cómo este problema se pone en la vasta área de América Latina.
ECLAC and how this is faced in Latin America.
Muy buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon to all of you. I want to congratulate the government of Mexico and the organizers for this multi-sectoral dialogue, open dialogue that summons us to be here during these 2 days. Professor Hansen, during his presentation,
nos evidenció América Latina y el Caribe.
Latin America and the Caribbean. Somehow I want to be the voice of this region, which is the most unequal one in the world. In the same sense, the representative of ECLAC mentioned it. We know that the criteria that measure economic growth are not capable of measuring the economic level of a country. This situation plus financial difficulties in some traditional countries, therefore a decrease of the cooperation funds which are not reimbursed, make the panorama worse in a special way for those countries that are vulnerable. Most of the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean have been catalogued as middle income.
And the question about the big trap is having accepted such classification. They have been classified as middle income, and this is a topic at the ECLAC, whose chair is by Costa Rica. Now that I am talking in personal opinion, I want to underline some elements that have been agreed at that community, the ECLAC. At the second summit in January this year, a special statement was issued about the middle income, underlining the concerning about the use of this classification in spite of efforts and progress for the Millennium Goals. They face big challenges: inequality, poverty, affecting the most vulnerable group of the population, making distant progress. That's why it is important to identify structural gaps to understand such needs according to national activities and the development plans of each country. In this sense, with this new agenda, post-2015, we have key questions. How can we go this final step without falling in the middle-income trap? The main goal for middle-income countries is to achieve sustainability in development and to reach economic and social well-being for our population. And now about international donors, I think that the goal should be the same, helping that those countries classified as middle-income countries evolve in a sustainable development, and they give development to the international community, and particularly those that are less developed. And so we need to walk at the same path in three branches. Identify vulnerable sectors of each country. In this sense, I should say that in Costa Rica, we have advanced in some regards supported by the ICLAC. We have made joint work to identify and measure and prioritize our structural gaps which are not visible under the middle-income classification. We have identified in this meeting 9 structural gaps, which are the biggest challenges that we face. We created an interinstitutional commission with different sectors to have a first meeting, and this was carried out in San Jose with the ICLAC. The process is just about to start, and then we need to improve well governance for an efficient public management. In spite of efforts, we need more corporations focused and targeted to good governance in our countries, promoting the exchange of knowledge and good practices. And the last of the branches is to increase cooperation for education, science, technology, and innovation. Improve in these areas should be targeted to investment in capability development, and this will impact in productivity and equalitarian development in a society. Now, talking about science, technology, and innovation, Costa Rica reports good progress in the private sector, universities, and implementation of several incentives from the government area. However, according to official data, investment is not enough. To reach tangible advance, we need to increase not only national investment, but also a unified effort and incentivated partnerships among different sectors. Please understand that Costa Rica devotes 8% of its national budget to education. As a conclusion, and considering new development agenda criteria, we need to make heard the voice of middle-income countries, and the development agenda should include diversity of needs in development countries, and also focusing the needs on specific areas, not excluded strategies for each country, including those of middle income. So we invite all the fora where we discuss cooperation for development to include naturally these partnerships, so they also discuss cooperation for development to clarify and materialize this perspective. Getting back to the region, member states of ICLAC have expressed their wish to work in this agenda for 2015 in a coordinated and coherent manner with related processes that we have as today. And they have also expressed their need for this new agenda to have a universal and comprehensive nature, and it is considered with enough flexibility to respond to particularities of each country and region, being aware that there is no a single model or one-size-fits-all. So member countries agreed to work in an agenda which is including and focused on people, strengthening the effort to eradicate poverty and inequality, I am pleased to say that this is the reason that gathers us here in Mexico City. Thank you very much.
Very well. So this is already a picture of what is going on in a country and in relation with others in the same region. But it raises, therefore, the great question, which is, what is the role that the international community can play in respect of the middle-income countries? And I would like to ask this question to Ashraf Al-Arabi, which is the Minister of Planning and International Cooperation of Egypt. The question is, in fact, how do you think that the international community can support a country like yours when your country is also, in part, a new provider? What are your ideas?
Well, is it working? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Mario. Let me start by saying that it's a great pleasure and honor to be here, me and my Egyptian colleagues sitting over there, to be in Mexico City, representing our beloved country, Egypt, in this very important meeting. In fact, Egypt has always been an active participant in the aid effectiveness dialogue, starting from Paris, Accra, and Busan. So we supported Accra declaration, Paris declaration, Accra agenda, and Busan partnership. And we are here today to reaffirm our commitment to support this dialogue. Let me try to answer your question and to use the 5 minutes that I have effectively in just try to highlight some key messages that are closely related to the question, how the international community can support middle-income countries, especially my country. And let's start by the first message here, as rightly mentioned in the presentation, the excellent presentation. We cannot see all middle-income countries as one homogeneous group. So there is no one-size-fits-all agenda for all these countries. So low-middle-income countries, for example, like my country in Egypt, are suffering from many structural challenges. Very high levels of unemployment and poverty rate in Egypt, income inequalities, malnutrition, all these challenges that we are facing. So we need, I'm saying that just to mention that there is a need to have some kind of a country-specific agenda for development cooperation. And in fact, we have already started this in Egypt right after Accra. We worked closely with our international partners to develop what we call Cairo Agenda for Action on Aid Effectiveness. And we are pursuing this, and we plan to update it very soon. The second message that I want to say here is, while low-income, middle-income countries in general should receive more attention in any future agenda for effective development cooperation with MICs, countries in transition like Egypt should be in the central focus of all development partners. And in this regard, I would like to mention with great appreciation and to recognize the support, the sincere support that we have recently received from the World Bank Group, from EIB, from EBRD, Islamic Development Bank, Arab funds, countries like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait. Third, Egypt is an African country. So we fully support the recommendations of the African countries contained in the Abidjan Declaration in last February. also we emphasize the importance of development policies ownership and the rejection of any external conditionalities of official development assistance. The fourth message that I have is, while mobilizing more domestic resources is crucial in any homegrown development agenda, the role of the international community will remain key in overcoming the development challenges in low and middle income countries. So the need of low middle income countries for ODA must remain clearly emphasized. The fifth message is that inclusive development requires more empowerment of youth, women, disabled, and most vulnerable groups to be active participants in development agenda. Last, and of course not least, improving domestic accountability, transparency, setting strong monitoring and evaluation scheme, results-based evaluation, South-South cooperation, knowledge sharing, and paving the road for both the private sector and civil society to be more involved as development partners are key elements in any effective development cooperation agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was very clear, and I think that you addressed also in general how can the development effectiveness agenda help addressing the specific problems of the middle-income countries. So I would like to ask now to Margaret Chan, which is working all the time actually with the development effectiveness agenda. What do you think of this comment? What would you suggest to make a good place for the middle-income countries in the development agenda effective?
Thank you, Mario. Let me first and foremost thank the Mexican government for including effective development cooperation with middle-income countries in the agenda. This is such an important subject going forward. Now, what worries me the most from what I'm seeing in the health sector is the growing inequity, the social injustice, and also the lack of compassion and forgetting about people. We need to put people in the center. Now, I fully agree with a lot of the comments that were made by previous speakers. Middle-income countries is a very diverse group of countries, clearly in size, in income, in capacity, and in development potential. One size doesn't fit all, and I agree with my Egyptian colleague. But, you know, we also recognizing this is important. So what does that mean? I would envisage, not only in the remaining 600 plus days, but going forward to the post-2015, we will continue to see a continuum of development cooperation. What do I mean by that? Because, you know, the middle-income countries, some are at 1,000 GNP, others are at 12,000. Clearly, we would continue to see aid, grant, loan, catalytic support, innovative financing, South-South triangulation, until we reach the day of self-sufficiency and self-reliance. We should not be too surprised to see that it is a mix of development cooperation models. And the important point is it has to be country-specific, based on the country realities and the priorities. And that brings me to the important point about country ownership. We all agree on the Busan principles. It says about country ownership, inclusive partnership, results, accountability, and transparency. But are we walking our talk? And that's the challenge. If you look at the progress since Busan in the last 2 years, we have made some progress, but the progress is mixed. The area that we are doing quite well is more and more countries and development partners are untying their aid, less conditionality, but we are not home free yet. But what is troubling me is still the country ownership piece. Instead of investing in the national plan, people have pilots. There are pilots all over the place, and they do not have the capacity to scale up. And are we helping countries or compromising their very limited capacity to do so? Now, going forward, we need to recognize the importance of partnership. Whether we like it or not, it is already happening in your countries. So how can we work together to manage inclusive partnership in a way that we can get a win-win-win situation? Country leadership. Countries, do you have the capacity, to lead, number one? Institutional capacity as well as human resource capacity to have a good vision, to have a good plan, and to lead the coordination of all the partners. Coordination costs a lot of costs. It is frustrating sometimes. If countries don't have the capacity to bring all the partners together, it is not as easy as we think. Now, countries, are you prepared to lead by playing the stewardship? Can you put in place the right kind of environment for civil society, for youth, truly to make sure that their voices are heard? Can you put in place, a legal framework and policy to provide incentive for good foreign direct investment? Yes, industry, we know that you have to make profit. But as Alicia said, can you at the same time, while making profit, and also leave some gains for the people in the country? Now, what about other partners, like the UN organization? And to be honest with you, the reality is we are much better than before, but we are still duplicating, fragmenting, competing. So, moving forward, there is no place for the UN if we do not change. And I truly believe in that. And that is a driver, at least in my case, as Director General of the World Health Organization. I lead the charge with the support of member states, support and driven WHO reform, precisely on how can we support countries. Countries and their people must be in the center of the development going forward. WHO, and I have to thank our development partners and also our partners in health, we do have some very good examples to illustrate observing and respecting country ownership, division of labor in our area of core competencies, and have the International Health Partnership as a mechanism to hold all partners to account. So you can promise, but if you don't walk your promise, we are going to shame you. And this is the way to go. Now, what about other mechanisms? WHO, again, let me thank many countries like in UNITAID, Gavi, Global Fund. These are innovative financing mechanisms to mobilize global resources and to play a catalytic role so that countries can, over time, become self-sufficient to be able to buy the commodities they need for their HIV, TB, malaria, maternal and child health issues. So how do I see the way forward? From my perspective, I think we need to walk away from Mexico, reconfirming our support to the Busan principles and approach, and supporting the Mexico Global Partnership approach. And inclusive growth has to be shared, making sure that resources coming out of economic growth is fairly distributed to benefit all people in the countries. And I'm optimistic that WHO will be here as your good partner and to support your efforts. On that, let me once again thank the participants and also the panels.
Thank you very much. We had a series of contributions in our debate that I think design by themselves a red yarn, a storyline that connect them in a pretty coherent way in reality. I was not expecting it, but this is the case. We have heard of the fact that there are certain type of countries that are crucial both to fight poverty and also to allow for a further development of the world as such, in a certain sense, to contribute to global goods. But these countries have specific characteristics and, among others, heterogeneity. This requires appropriate measures to figure out in each country, as there is no one-fits-all strategy that pays, what are the bottlenecks? What are the opportunities for development in those countries? They cannot be generalized. We see common threats, but we do not see necessarily the same space for action. Here, the need to develop what? My professors, I am old, I did both the Punic War, but at that time my professor used to say, these are strategies for development. So there is a big call that comes out from here for strategies for development, national development strategy. What with Alicia we are doing in countries now like Uruguay, Panama and others. And this strategy should include, was so said, should include both issues of productivity and issues of social cohesion. This strategy should take into account that we have to address problems and opportunities, and they are not up in the air or in statistics, but are in places where people live, what is called territorial dimension of the development. Here we heard countries that say, we are in part doing it in Latin America, Costa Rica with others, is trying to build some way to cooperate and to discuss. And we have heard countries that say, look, we have thought to do these strategies, there are some conditions for in this case. And the international organization can play a role. Do they presently play that role? No, we need some reforms. The discussion that came out from here, under my point of view, was extraordinarily clear. I want to thank all the participants up to now, but it's the time to ask from the floor. Well, it's a very closed floor. We know the people that we enter from the floor. But what are the reactions? What are the considerations that they want to make? We don't have time. We will give each of you 3 minutes. But it's very important to listen from them. And in particular, let me ask first Kiel Jacobson, that comes from TUAC, the organization grouping the unions. And TUAC in Brazil. You have heard several times issue about inequalities. We know that it's extraordinary what Brazil has done in terms of reduction of inequalities. It's one of the few countries that have been capable to reduce inequalities, both in developing and in developed countries, where inequalities have increased enormously recently. What do you think of what you have heard here? Do you think we are addressing the right issues?
Well, I'm going to speak in Spanish.
Sí, sí, como quiera.
Ok. Primeiramente, felicitar as ponências e dizer que estamos de acordo, nós outros sindicatos, com várias intervenções, em particular de nossa diretora-geral de la CEPAL, Alicia Bárcena. Pero comentando sobre o tema cooperação e critérios de classificação de países, nós outros sentimos que o critério PIB per capita ha servido, entre outras coisas, como uma justificativa para cambiar os objetivos da cooperação, mas que produzir uma análise sobre os países que lo necessitam ou não. Há países de renda média alta, onde não há cambios significativos em los aportes, pero sí de las finalidades. Diminuíram os aportes para a coesão social e aumentaram os aportes para objetivos como infraestructura. Ok, then I wait.
Un momentito porque no se escucha en el headphone, me dicen, ¿escuchaban vosotros?
They are telling me that they couldn't hear the translation, so could you start
Now
again? There was no translation. Now it's working.
Diminuíram os
To
aportes para
decrease
a coesão social
contributions for
e
social
aumentaram os
cohesion
aportes
and
para
increase
objetivos como
contribution for
infraestrutura
objectives
e
such as
serviços
infrastructure
de grande
and
interesse das
services of great
empresas.
interest for companies.
Obviamente, necessitamos e queremos
we
melhor
do need and we
infraestrutura,
want to have better
pero o
infrastructure.
risco dessa
But
política
the
é
risk
excluir
of these
os países
policies
de
to
renda mais
exclude
baixa
lower
e de
income
interesse de
countries
mercados mais pequenos de la ruta de
interest
la
of markets
cooperação.
which are lower on
Además,
cooperation
seguimos
routes. Besides,
necessitando
we
de
still
aportes
need
para
contributions
combater as
to combat
desigualdades las vulnerabilidades y promover la inclusión
vulnerabilities, and to
social,
promote
la
social
protección social,
inclusiveness,
el
social
trabajo
protection,
decente,
decent
la
work,
igualdad de oportunidades entre hombres y mujeres
same
y
opportunities
fortalecer la
between
sociedad
men and
civil.
women, and to
En
strengthen
Brasil,
civil society
país de
in
onde
Brazil,
vengo,
the country
hay
where I come
iniciativas
from. There are
promovidas
initiatives
por
that have
nuestros
been promoted
presidentes
by our presidents,
socialistas, como dijo el
socialist, as Professor
Lula y Dilma, muy
Rosling mentioned,
importantes
Lula and Digma,
como las
and
transferencias de
these have been
ingresos,
very
que demuestran la
interesting
importancia
as
de la
income
inversión
transfers,
y la
which show
cohesión
the
social,
importance of investments and
inclusive con
social
buenos
cohesion,
resultados
even with good
económicos
economic
y que
results,
sacaron millones de
which
personas de la pobreza.
took
Por lo
millions
tanto,
of
hay que
people
buscar
out of poverty. Therefore, you
equilibrio
have
entre
to
los
look for a
objetivos
balance
de
between
cooperación
cooperation
con los
objectives
países de renta
with
media. Hablamos mucho sobre
middle-income
eficacia de la
countries. We talk
cooperación al
a lot
desarrollo,
about
pero poco
effective
sobre el
development cooperation, but we
desarrollo que
don't talk
queremos
about the
y
development
cuáles
we
son sus
want
parámetros.
and the parameters of
Entendemos
such
que los
development. We
sindicatos son
understand that
actores de
unions
desarrollo por su
are
papel
development
en la formación de
stakeholders
mercados
because
domésticos
they form
y
domestic
definición de
markets
políticas de
and they
bienestar
define
social.
social
Por eso, la
well-being
Confederación
policies. That's
Sindical de
why
las Américas
the
adoptó
Americas
como uno de
Union
sus
Confederation adopted as one of
la
its
presentación
priorities
de una plataforma de
presenting
desarrollo
a
de las
development
Américas
platform for the
como
Americas
contraposición
as a
a la crisis económica
counterposition
mundial
to the
y al
worldwide
neoliberalismo.
economic crisis
Esta
and
plataforma subraya los
neoliberalism. This
cuatro ejes
platform
del
underlines
desarrollo
the four
sustentable,
axes of sustainable
económico,
growth,
social, ambiental y
economic
político,
and social,
y
as well as
reconoce el
environmental
papel
and political, and
fundamental
it
del
acknowledges
Estado
the
y de
fundamental
las
role of the
políticas
state
públicas
and
como
public
inductor,
policies as an
planificador y
inductor,
conductor del desarrollo,
planner,
que también
and
vivimos en
driver of
Brasil.
development that we also
Necesitamos, por
lived
tanto,
in
de
Brazil.
parámetros mejores
Therefore, we
que
need better
simplesmente las fuerzas
parameters
del mercado
other than
para
just the market
definir
forces
los
to
rumos del
define
desarrollo.
the
Gracias.
pathway
Muchísimas
of
gracias.
development. Thank you very
Muy
much.
claro, sobre
That
todo
was
el
very
punto,
clear,
el
especially
desarrollo
when you mentioned
un
development.
tema sobre el
That
cual se debe
is
discutir.
an extremely important subject we
Muy
have
bien.
to
Ahora,
reflect upon. Very well
Godfrey
now.
Simbeye, Executive Director of the Tanzanian
Executive
Private
Director
Sector
of Tanzania
Foundation.
Private Sector Foundation.
What do you think of what we have heard up to now?
¿Qué piensa usted de lo que hemos mencionado hasta ahora?
Do you think that
Godfrey
it's clear
Simbeye,
what
director
we can
ejecutivo
exchange to each
de la
other?
Fundación del Sector Privado de Tanzania.
Hello. Chairman, thank you very much. Well, it is clear what has been discussed, but I would like to ask the panelists some of the issues that we would like to have clarification from them. Based on the classification that is being used right now, as we have seen, that is outdated, we have almost 48 countries which are classified as MICs, and 36 countries which are classified as low-income countries, including my country as well, which is Tanzania, where I come from. And we know that the MICs have acquired that status because they have done something different from the low-income countries, such as better macroeconomic policies, better utilization of resources, better investment in infrastructure, etc., etc. But if you look at them, all of them, they have really utilized their own natural resources to be where they are. But in Africa today, I can tell you that there are more than 40 countries that have discovered energy resources in terms of oil and gas. My own country, we have discovered almost 46 trillion cubic feet of natural gas, which is worth about $500 billion US. So we have enough natural resources. But, of course, Botswana is in the middle-income country because they have minerals and they have utilized their minerals properly to allocate the revenue from the minerals into productive sectors, which is good. But we have a worst case in Africa, which is the Democratic Republic of Congo. This is almost the richest country in Africa in terms of minerals. They say they have untapped minerals of about 24 trillion US, which is more than the GDP of United States and Europe as well. But DRC is classified as the poorest country in the world. Could you tell me that that is realistic? Is this realistic? Is this classification really realistic? Something is wrong somewhere. And I would like to ask you, the panelists, what innovative criteria can the international community undertake to support and to stimulate growth in these countries or in the MICs to graduate into the next level of economic growth. This is my question to the panelists, to tell me what can we do in these countries? What is that new criteria that can be done to make this country achieve economic growth and graduate into the middle-income country?
Thank you very much, Rafi. Very crucial question. It would deserve a panel in itself. I do think so. Let's take the last one and see what we can and now answer some of those questions. Last one, which is Sergei Rybkov, which is the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation.
Thank you very much, moderator. And let me first congratulate you and the whole panel for extremely interesting and at times exciting exchange. I also would like to thank the Mexican organizers for this conference, which we attend, we, Russian delegation, because of two reasons. Number one, we have done a lot already in the area of development assistance and development cooperation, and we will do more. And we are now also establishing a new federal agency that will specifically deal with these issues, where we are fully determined to have more in terms of investment, intellectual resources, and cooperation with all of you. And the head of this agency, Mr. Konstantin Kosachev, happens to be here with me. Please stand up. You'll see more of this gentleman in the years to come. Given the time limits, I'm not going to bore all of you with the prepared statements. We have two. We would ask organizers, steering committee, co-chairs for the next period to, properly refer those into the final report. My question is based on our own experience. We have heard a lot during this panel, and the benchmark of the debate was set very high by Professor Hansen. I took in particular note of the need to deal with criteria and evolution of the criteria, but still we do not have the new ones yet, and we in our own efforts proceeded from per capita income calculation of World Bank. And we worked with Belarus on some specific projects exactly on the area of effective development cooperation with some involvement of the UN. And in fact, we do not see any track of UN system crisis and that bad need of UN reform, as many in this hall may believe. But to give you a few examples, together with UNIDO, we worked with Belarusian friends on two projects, namely support and training for food processing enterprises, in particular Oblast of Grodno, establishment of agro-industrial park there. The second project relates to international cooperation and strengthening and policy support to upgrade component manufacturers in the automotive industry in Belarus. We have several projects in pipeline, very diverse, very interesting ones, like support to the implementation of the National Program of Demographic Security in the Republic of Belarus, together with FAO, capacity development for climate change adaptation and mitigation in the agricultural sector, a WHO sponsored project, thank you for this, Ms. Chen, implementation of the organized mass screening of cervical and breast cancer of the population, child injury prevention, support to employment and self-employment in small cities of the Republic of Belarus, and in fact, regional cooperation. I'm very grateful to the distinguished Vice Mayor of the beautiful city of Lyon of picking this issue up. We are doing so with Belarus for quite a period already, and just to mention a few areas of this interaction, we are working with the Bryansk region in Russia and Gomel region in Belarus in areas like cooperation in ensuring sustained socio-economic development of both territories, promotion of trade, effective use of natural resources, development of agriculture, food processing industry, infrastructure including transportation, as well as promotion of exchange of information and effective governance, cooperation in the field of research and development. This is a very practical interaction, and we feel positive results of this work on effective development cooperation in upgrading living standards of border regions, both in Belarus and in my own country. So now the question to the panelists, I don't have any specific idea to whom in particular, but given the fact that we are all moving towards, a bespoke kind of development cooperation, individually tailored cooperation, what do you think of these very focused, very target-oriented, very accountable, although limited projects? Do you see a future there? Do you believe they should be combined with something else? We are learning here, and we want your advice. Thank you.
Thank you. We have heard a series of interventions and questions. It was a very intense and dense discussion, as you can see. Unfortunately, the time is flying away, and there are the people already working in for the next panel. So please sit down. If you want to listen also to the next panel, it will be taken, if not, your seat. But still, we have the duty to answer very quickly to some of these questions. Let me try just to introduce one element on some of the questions. I think that the point was very clear. In the strategy for development, there are several dimensions, and they vary from country to country. But there is for sure two dimensions that appear in all the intervention. One is productivity. Productivity is flat. Productivity in many developing countries did not increase despite the great GDP improvement. Why so? In part it's because the specialization of country in production of natural resources very often face the Dutch disease, and as such create a society a little bit more polarized, a lot more polarized, and without improvement in productivity, that remains very weak, without investment in research and development. Therefore, what to do? And the African Union is insisting and stressing the importance of industrial policy in this respect. I think that the question of Godfrey was very helpful. What to do now? Yes, to use the experience of middle-income countries that are industrializing, that are in many cases already industrialized, and share this experience in order to address some of those questions. And as for the specific project, we have listened how important it is to address the appropriate and relevant unit of analysis and intervention, that very often is not national, very often is specific, is local. This is the place where the problem appears and they can be solved. But there was also a very major question, and this will be the last intervention of this panel, and the very question was how the middle-income country can find a place in the post-2015 agenda. That's the crucial element that remains to be further debated. We don't have the possibility, enough time to give a complete answer, but Alicia, what do you think? Bien.
Gracias, Mario. Bueno, para la agenda post-2015, yo creo que los países de renta media tenemos que entender algo muy importante. Primero, evitar la fragmentación. La agenda post-2015 debe ser universal, inclusiva, debe incluir a todos y, por lo tanto, no podemos aceptar que nos compartimentalicen entre middle incomes, los LDCs, los SEEDs, que vamos a acabar peleándonos entre nosotros por los fondos de asistencia al desarrollo. No, la agenda post-2015 es una agenda hacia la igualdad, hacia el cambio estructural de nuestros países para alcanzar la igualdad, y para ello lo que se requiere es una ecuación entre el Estado, el mercado y la sociedad, en donde no haya solo la predominancia del mercado. Ya no funcionó la autorregulación. Tiene que haber el papel del Estado, como lo dijo el colega de Brasil, pero la sociedad tiene que participar participar. Y yo en la sociedad veo a los trabajadores, veo a los parlamentarios que deberían estar aquí fuertemente, a la sociedad, a las ONGs, a los activistas, a todos deberían estar incluidos. Y en la agenda, todos aquí en este panel, aquí adelante, trabajando con nosotros, porque esta nueva ecuación Estado-Mercado-Sociedad nos tiene que llevar a un pacto por país, pero a un pacto también global de, por ejemplo, lo que dijo el colega de África, necesitamos gobernanza, pero no que nos vengan a decir qué gobernanza requerimos soberanamente, no. ¿Por qué no hacemos la gobernanza de los recursos naturales? ¿Por qué no hablamos de la propiedad, la apropiación y la distribución de las ganancias de productividad de los recursos naturales? ¿Por qué no usamos las rentas extraordinarias de los recursos naturales en inversión en educación, en salud, en infraestructura, etcétera? Pero para eso necesitamos que las compañías que vienen a nuestros países a extraer los recursos naturales hagan un pacto con nosotros y con la sociedad, porque si no, la sociedad civil no los va a dejar seguir extrayendo recursos naturales porque están interviniendo en sus comunidades y hay una gran cantidad de conflictos socioambientales, ¿o no? Entonces, tenemos que adquirir una capacidad para cerrar estas brechas, primero que nada, para ponernos de acuerdo como sociedad para dónde rayos vamos. O sea, aquí en México, ¿qué sociedad queremos? ¿Una sociedad más igual? Ok, ¿en qué frentes? ¿Qué sectores? Las industrias, Mario. Este país necesita, por ejemplo, recobrar las políticas de industrialización, democratizar la productividad, democratizar la innovación, la ciencia, la tecnología. Yo diría, darle a los trabajadores sus derechos. Aquí en América Latina tenemos 47% de la gente que no tiene acceso a la protección social. Así no se puede. Entonces, necesitamos una agenda basada en derechos, una agenda que vaya hacia el cambio estructural. Cada país definirá el suyo, que cierre brechas muy importantes globales, financieras, comerciales, etcétera, pero sobre todo que cada sociedad construya su pacto social. Gracias.
Muchísimas gracias. Por favor, agradecemos a todos los participantes de este debate muy intenso, muy rico. Y muchísimas gracias por seguirnos bien que hemos pasado el tiempo.
For your attention. Thank you very much.